I still remember that this was the only movie I saw in 1997 where as you entered the movie hall, your ID was checked. Because of that rule, I was very upset at the time, but I knew why when the movie started. The screen came on and the lights went down, the big bug showed up. Young people with laser guns and blood all over the place, heroes who look good in shiny outfits. I sat up straight, my heart racing, and dreamed about having guns and fighting in space. But the lights came on after the show was over. I went outside and the film's strange perfection made people walk down the street in a strange way. Not until a long time after the internet became popular, I watched it again and slowly observed some strange things that I never paid attention to as a child. Did you know that Paul Verhoeven took off his to make the women less shy? He took off his pants and stood on set naked? Or that the crew used more than 300,000 live rounds, which almost burned the whole thing badly. Cast. And that the days they shot at Hell's Hofacre were so rough that Michael Ironside had to go to the hospital to get water through and for. We will open the again today, Starship Troopers Darkness and Weirdest Backstage Doors. Point 20. He once took off his pants to make the women feel less shy. When I saw Starship Troopers for the first time, I still remember the scene where all the male and female women trainees were taking showers in the same room, which shocked me. I also asked myself if this was normal. Maybe. In the late 1990s, being naked was still a pretty taboo thing to do. And that scene in the shared shower was really weird for everyone. The man and the female players had to take off all of their clothes and stand among dozens of people. Everyone tried to keep their eyes off of each other. It felt so heavy that you could feel I could hear someone swallowing. Then Paul Verhoeven, who was over 50 at the time, stepped out into the middle of the floor, took off his pants, and stood naked in front of everyone. He freely walked around the sets and talked to everyone, so the players would see that being naked wasn't a problem. Something too bad to say. The whole team, including cinematographer Joss Vicano, laughed out loud and then took a video. The scene with no more trouble. After that, they even used fake things to make fun of each other and calm down the stress. Many people are still shocked when they see that scene again, but not many people know that it was once opened by someone who was simple and brave. Point 19. They were almost killed by real guns. In fact, every scene in Starship Troopers made me hold my breath because it was so realistically scary. The loud explosions and fights. And to make that happen, the crew do not be afraid to spend a lot of money on results that matter. They even used real guns to make it seem more real. Everyone didn't think that this would almost kill the group, though. At that time, CGI wasn't advanced enough to take the place of everything. So, Robert Rock Galati, an expert on guns, brought more than 300,000 blank rounds to the set, which was a huge number for that time. They also changed the real M15 and M16 rifles to Spitfire instead of just depending on effects that happen after the fact. The gun barrels let out sparks that sometimes went straight into the faces, necks, and ears of the artists. A lot of them had light burns that made their skin red and hurt, and they needed to be wrapped right away. In some takes, that it was so loud that it hurt your ears, and the smell of burned gunpowder filled the room. After Rock voice still a little shaky as they talked about it. The movie had to be real and painful, even though we knew it was risky. Even though the wounds weren't very bad, they were enough to show that pain could still be there in the midst of the made-up fire and smoke. So real that people almost died. That scene still makes my heart race. When you watch it again, because it's more than just a picture, it reminds you of days on set that were full of risk and hard work. Point 18. Hell's Hofacre in Wyoming was used to film the conditions of hell. Few people know that Starship Troopers was filmed in a real place that was so harsh that the whole movie felt like a movie set. The team said it was like hell on earth. Hell's Hofacre in Wyoming is a dry, dusty desert. Everywhere there is wind, and temperatures can hit 43 degrees Celsius in very hot conditions. Sunlight. Sand got into lenses and gear that was used for filming and kept breaking it down. There were times when heavy rain all of a sudden made the clay soil into thick mud, which damaged hundreds of tons of props to sink deep into the mud. Dozens of people had to dig all night to take everything apart and put it back together again from scratch. Their military outfits were thick and heavy, and they had to run and as the sun beats down, jump. Many people got serious heat stroke being thirsty and so tired that they could fall over right there. Michael Ironside, who played Gene Rassack, had to go to the hospital right away for four drinks because his body couldn't handle it. It smelled like sweat and dust, and the wind howled all day and night. Everyone was very tired. But those days of toughness made a strange link. Inside the film group. Back then, making movies meant living in bad conditions and not just sitting in front of a camera. A green screen like today. The rough hands and burnt skin stayed as proof of a time when people worked hard to pay for movies. Point 17. The actors kept getting hurt while shooting. When I watch Starship Troopers again, I always get scared during the action scenes where blood and screams could be heard everywhere. If they were real. But did you know that the artists sometimes had to risk their own safety? Back then, safety impacts were not as developed as it is now. There were times when the rigging lines came loose, and everyone had to jump into the scenes with their own bodies. During a crazy scene, Patrick Mullen, who played Dizzy Casper Van Eyne, fell face first by chance. He almost broke his in that fall. Neck. He was lucky that it only lasted a short time. Not ending there, Van Eyne got hurt in a lot of different ways. He cracked his ribs hitting props and lost a lot of teeth in a fight scene. His mouth was bleeding from being hit all the time. Those little cuts built up, but no one made a big deal out of it. They quickly put on bandages, drank some water, and went on being shot. That was how people felt in the 90s. It was worth the little pain as long as the scene looked real. These scars and later fake teeth look like they belonged to a group of actors who were willing to do anything for the movie. It's not just a science fantasy movie that Starship Troopers was. Also, it was a story about real people who worked hard and died so that those famous moments could happen. 16. Come from Heinlein's book from 1959. Not someone like me is going to kill you and everything you have one day, race. We all know that Starship Troopers was based on an old science fiction story. Robert A. Heinlein's fantasy book came out in 1959. The book was written during the worst part of the Cold War, when people were afraid of communism, the United States. Heinlein imagined a society in the future where citizenship, in this case the people who had served in the military, were the only ones who could vote. Anyone who did not serve in the military would always be citizens and have no say in politics. That thought got the important Hugo Award, but it also got a lot of bad reviews for being militaristic and biased and showing how worried people were at the time about what would happen to democracy without strict rules. It was clear that Paul Verhoeven felt uncomfortable when he looked at the original work to make the movie. He read some of it, stopped because it was too far right and Nazi for him. Instead of being loyal, Verhoeven and scriptwriter Ed Neuer chose to make it into sharp satire that keeps the grand appearance of military but makes it seem ridiculous so that the audience will laugh, check to see what they were cheering for. When we look back, Heinlein's book was the voice of a worried time. The movie turned into a jokey laugh at those fears. The difference between the first and Starship Troopers was both fun to watch and a quick lesson in history when it was turned into a movie. Huge bugs fight. 15 scary scenes were cut because of NC-17. Now it's possible that the movie could have had scenes of soldiers being cut in half by bugs and scenes of the bra and a lot more about bug-eating brains. It's possible that Starship Troopers would not have been as popular as it is now. Today, Paul Verhoeven and the effects team wanted to make the blood and guts more intense at first. As high as possible scenes of huge bugs cutting troops in half with their claws and blood flying everywhere, or people could see pictures of the brain bug sucking brains with its proboscis because they were so realistic. Brains are being taken out in pieces. These pictures were put together in the rough cut, which was full of blood and body horror. The style Verhoeven had used in RoboCop or Total Recall before. But when they showed it to the MPAA ratings board, they warned right away to give it an NC-17 rating, which is the strictest label at that point. The movie would almost certainly not be able to be shown in big theaters for money. It would be advertising if it were banned. The box office would fall apart. It took a lot less blood for the film crew to cut fewer, getting rid of the bloody parts and blurring the bloodiest parts to make it R. Verhoeven and the directors agreed to cut down on the blood and guts so that the movie could be shown to more people, even though he was angry about it. Told us to make it less scary so people would watch. The rest of the scenes still people were shocked, but anyone who heard about the first cut knew that the final version was missing some of what made the first cut great. Evil power. Even though it was a bad choice, that choice let Starship Troopers reach millions of people and kept its humor instead of turning into just a bloody scary movie. 14. The first scene, which was based on Victory of the Will. A lot of young people from around the world are getting together to protect the future. I am doing what I can. I am doing what I can. I am doing what I can. I am also doing what I can. From the very beginning, Starship Troopers made it clear that it wasn't an sci-fi movie that is safe. The first scene of recruitment, with flags flying, happy music, and a sure narration wasn't put together by chance. Paul Verhoeven said out loud that Hike got its ideas from the famous Nazi propaganda picture Triumph of the Will by Leni Riefenstahl. Birds mixture with equal parts. All of them had young faces that were looking ahead. The power of visual language in marketing. It's not that Verhoeven copied to praise, but to pretend. He blew everything out of proportion, making it look so shiny that it wasn't real. The goal was to get people to look at it and feel like something was wrong. However, not everyone was at fault. You saw the irony. A lot of people who saw the first scene only saw bravery, unity, and a call to action. To help. At that point, the movie did its riskiest experiment yet, putting the audience in the role of a citizen being swayed by propaganda and then watching in silence to see how far they would get rust. 13. Paul Verhoeven, who was first known as the unique work fascist. Instead of many directors who try to look to show respect for the source material, Paul Verhoeven decided to be bluntly honest. He said at his reading of the Starship Troopers book by Robert A. Heinlein was cut short. He didn't do it because he didn't have time, but because he thought it was too fascist and dull. But instead of following the book as in order to honor the troops, Verhoeven and screenwriter Ed Neuer chose to do the contrary, make it into a parody of advertising with a huge budget. People once called the movie a $100 million Trojan horse because it seemed like a great sci-fi movie on the outside. It looked like an action movie, but it was really a sharp satire of military. Blind obedience. He didn't want to give a speech. He wanted people to fall for the trap, then they slowly came to understand they were being led. This plan was dangerous, and in real life it went wrong for a lot of people. But Starship Troopers was a work because of how brave it was. That isn't the same as any other version. 12. Changing what Dizzy is like. We didn't have enough money to start an if there wasn't already one. You don't agree? That's too bad. Dizzy is one of the main characters who is different from the first book. Dizzy is a man in the book. In the movie, the character was made female to set up a love triangle between Mario, Rico, and Dizzy. The choice wasn't just made to add more emotion, but also to bring attention to the emotional costs that war had for young people. On the screen, Dizzy wasn't a very good hero. She loved Rico in a weird way. She was okay with coming in second, and in the end, she paid with her life. Dizzy's sad story made death in Starship Troopers is no longer just a number, it's a real, terrible loss. It's interesting, because of how people responded to test screenings, the team had to make even more changes. People didn't like Carmen because she was too cold and driven. The scene where she and Rico kissed was cut. This accidentally changed the love story was all about Dizzy, which made her death even more sad. It was a great show how Starship Troopers was shaped not only by artistic purpose but also by how people reacted to it as it was being finished. 11. The effects of monsters were unimaginable. What do the big bugs in Starship Troopers have? It's always scared me every time I watch it again. Huge, dangerous creatures moving at the crowd felt like they were actually charging toward the screen because of how fast it was moving. That time, CGI was not strong enough to make things that are fully real. So, the crew had to come up with very clever ways to do things by hand. For the real bugs, they used bamboo, tennis balls, mops, and even wooden sticks to help players picture where the enemies are and how they're moving. Phil Tippett, who was in charge of the stop motion in Jurassic Park, was asked to oversee the project. The bugs moving around makes them look more real and scary. ILM spent as much as it took 24 hours to create a single frame, which seems like a very long time given how fast computers are today. Unique in 1997, the impacts were still rough and not very strong. It was, however, just that the bug looked so real and scary because it was made by hand. This is proof of when people's hard work was still more important than any technology in movies. 10. The ending of Buenos Aires. The part where Buenos Aires dies has always been one of the scariest parts of Starship Troopers. The size wasn't the only thing that made it unique. The eerie feeling of being familiar. The reason was that computers did not make all of that scene. The group used real video from the 1991 wildfire in Oakland, where whole neighborhoods were destroyed by flame smoke. Putting pictures of real disasters in a science fiction movie wasn't a choosing at chance. For Verhoeven, the damage should look more like a news show than a special effects show. Show off. People who watched the city fall saw more than just buildings exploding. They also saw a group memory of some of them had seen disaster pictures on TV before. This made Rico's sad moment even worse. Denser. Buenos Aires was no longer a made-up city, it looked like any city on Earth. When CGI and real images were mixed together, the line between fantasy and reality, giving war in space a very human look all of a sudden. 9. A work process that is a mess. Most likely, you didn't know that during the whole making of Starship Troopers, everyone agreed on one thing. No one actually got it. What Verhoeven Paul was doing. The project changed all the time. The supervisor's changes were made to artistic choices, and there was always a mix of trust and doubt behind the scenes. For many on the team, this was just a big sci-fi action movie that had to be finished on time. Which is unclear. Verhoeven was given full power. No one felt sure enough to step in. Nobody dared to say the movie was going in the wrong way because no one could figure out what the direction was. Have tossed that space to make his sarcastic point even stronger by inserting fake there is propaganda, fascist imagery, and decisions that are meant to make people feel bad. Many people were shocked to find out they had been a part of something else when the movie was different from what they initially imagined. It was too late to turn around at that point. 8. Casting players like choosing military posters, everyone in Starship Troopers did a great job, which made the movie feel very sharp. Paul Verhoeven did not choose bigger stars or famous names. He consciously sought young, beautiful faces that looked somewhat empty and technically perfect, exactly like soldiers seen on wartime recruitment signs. Casper Van Eyne with his bright smile. Denise Richards, attractive and cold. Neil Patrick Harris, bright and sharp, all carried the perfect look of fascist idealism. This was not accidental. Verhoeven wanted watchers to see them as both familiar and eerie, both beautiful and suspicious. When those faces shouted patriotic slogans and cheered for victory, the satire finally revealed itself. They were not heroes but symbols of a propaganda scheme. That casting was like choosing models for posters, not seeking actors to tell deep stories. The result was that the film had not only action but layers of subtle satire, making viewers ask themselves, whom are we cheering for and why do we find them so beautiful? 7. Misunderstood by critics. Do you remember that when Starship Troopers premiered in 1997, many major critics judged it harshly? Unexpected Degree, Roger Ebert, who had praised many of Verhoeven's previous works, gave it a low score and wrote that the film celebrates violence and militarism in a stupid way. He called it a brainless action film, completely missing the subtle satire hidden beneath the glossy surface. Many newspapers followed the film was criticized for promoting fascism, lacking moral depth, and its young pretty faces shouting patriotism were seen as promoting extremism. TriStar Pictures truly panicked. They worried that audiences would think the film accidentally or intentionally promoted fascism, especially when the box office numbers were disappointing. At one point they even considered cutting more scenes or adding disclaimers to explain more clearly, but Verhoeven firmly refused. He wanted audiences to feel it on their own. And if they misunderstood, that was part of the joke. That misunderstanding in hindsight became the film's greatest success. 6. Who pretending to be an insect. Whenever I think about the behind the scenes of Starship Troopers, I cannot help but smile remembering Paul Verhoeven, a director over 50 years old with salt and pepper hair, transforming himself into a giant bug on set. To help actors truly immerse, he did not only instruct with words. A crew member recalled that Verhoeven held a megaphone, jumped around like an agitated insect, screaming at full force as if he was actually a bug. He did not do it just once but repeatedly in large action scenes, to the point that the crew became familiar with the sight. Those moments were both humorous and sincere, showing that Verhoeven was not afraid to lower himself to get real emotion from the actors. At that time, directors often had to perform with the crew to transmit inspiration, and Verhoeven did it thoroughly. Thanks to that, the bugs on screen were not merely effects, but carried real terror from human reactions. 5. The short film segments are wartime propaganda. Did you notice that the short segments inserted into Starship Troopers with the familiar question, "Would you like to know more?" sounded exactly like World War II propaganda films? Those segments were made with clear intention: images of neatly marching soldiers, flags waving, bold narration, and intense dramatic music. They resembled to an eerie degree the propaganda films of Nazi Germany or wartime America. But Verhoeven intentionally exaggerated them to the point of absurdity. The soldiers smiled brightly like an advertisement poster. Children cheered. Everything looked artificially perfect. He wanted the audience to laugh at the exaggeration first, then gradually ask themselves, what are we watching at? And why is it so attractive? Those propaganda reels were not just filler between action scenes, but the satirical shell of the entire film. They reminded that propaganda could make anything, even brutal war, look glamorous and worth pursuing. Many viewers in 1997 watched without recognizing the second layer, assuming it was just a fun action movie. But looking back, those short segments were the sharpest part, making Starship Troopers not only science fiction, but a warning about the power of images and words in manipulating thought. They still haunt me every time I rewatch because they are too real and too close to what we have seen in real life. 4. Fascist imagery by design. One of the biggest controversies around Starship Troopers was the military aesthetic with fascist overtones, the glossy black uniforms, high collars, metal insignia, angular helmets, all reminiscent of SS uniforms from Nazi Germany. The architecture in the film as well, massive buildings, tall pillars, wide plazas with flags waving just like Berlin under Hitler. Paul Verhoeven did not do this by accident. He once said bluntly in an interview, "If you simply say fascism is bad, no one listens. I will show them what fascism is, show them its attraction." He intentionally inserted those images into the film without hiding and even made them glamorous and appealing. Beautiful uniforms, strict discipline, patriotic slogans, everything presented like an ideal dream. Who wanted the audience to confront that dangerous attraction? Why do these things make us feel stirred? Why do we so easily get swept along? That visual layer made the film not just sci-fi action but also a quiet warning. Many people in 1997 laughed at the exaggeration but gradually realized what looks beautiful on screen can be very real outside of it. And that is the most frightening part. 3. Who is the real invader? I always asked myself, who is truly the invader in this story? The film intentionally flipped everything in a subtle way. Humans with the slogan, "It's afraid." And the military campaigns against the bug planets were the ones who initiated invasion first. The giant bugs only reacted in self-defense, protecting their territory when attacked. Boven never said this right away. He let the audience question through each scene the propaganda reels cheering victory, the bloody battles, and the moments when the bugs simply existed without needing explanation. No character stood up to say, "We were wrong." Instead, the film let the audience feel the asymmetry. Humans declared themselves the victims, yet they were the ones who started the war. That question quietly lingered, making me unable to watch the film simply as an action movie. Many viewers initially ignored that layer, only enjoying the bug being shot. But looking back, they realized the film not only mocked militarism, it also forced us to confront how humans justify their own violence. That was the deepest layer and also why Starship Troopers remains haunting today. 2 Test screening audiences reacted with mixed feelings. When Starship Troopers was released in 1997, many viewers left the theater with a blend of confusion and discomfort. The film was marketed as a sci-fi action blockbuster, guns, giant bugs, massive effects. Many watched and assumed it was a film praising the military and celebrating heroism. So they criticized it harshly. They wrote letters to newspapers, posted on early forums, and even called Boven a hidden fascist. Some said the film glorified violence, worshipped war, and the young beautiful faces shouting patriotism made them uncomfortable because it looked too real. Boven knew this, but he refused to explain. He wanted people to feel as if the propaganda videos and catchy slogans were having an effect on them. He said in a rare that if they are angry, it means the film hit the right spot. The responses, which ranged from praise to insults, showed that the satire worked. A lot of people hated it at first, but then they watched it again and saw the second side. The movie didn't back up fascism, but made fun of how easily we could be swayed by flashy calls to action. 1 Cult hit that didn't do well at the box office. When it first came out, Starship Troopers wasn't the hit that was hoped for. It cost about $100 million to make, only about $121 million were made around the world, which is a disappointing number for a big hit in Hollywood. It was seen as a project gone wrong, a failure, and a common case of wasting a lot of money on an idea that doesn't make sense. But the movie didn't go there and die. Through VHS, cable TV, DVD, and watching over and over again. To the audiences, Starship Troopers was slowly re-evaluated as it got older. The dark joke became known to more people, sharp satire, and a rare lack of fear in big-budget sci-fi movies. What used to be being criticized became the very thing that kept the movie alive. These days, Starship Troopers people remember as one of the best cult movies ever, not because it was simple to understand, but because it were brave enough to make the audience feel bad and let them answer for themselves. That may have been Paul Boven's biggest win. Thanks for seeing it. Please like, share, and subscribe if you like this video so you don't miss our next videos. Tell us what you think in the space below. Please get in touch with me. We'll see you next time.